for having me.
Okay. Our second story tonight is of a woman who gave up her child for adoption at birth. Maureen has been with us all day long, doing some wonderful arts and crafts with kids and sharing some of her God-given talents, freedom of expression, and just the pleasure of being alive. So I welcome Maureen, who comes here to tell her story and bring some of her family with her, I believe. And this is Maureen McMahon.
I think probably I should ask that we say a prayer together just for my ability to get through this. So I need to be able to look at all of you as my friends, kind of. And Lord, I just ask you to put the right words in my mouth. Help me to control my emotions. And just help me to tell my story, Lord. Thank you. Well, as you can see, I will be somewhat emotional. In March, I received a letter. I was at work and it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was checking my email to see if an email blast had gotten to my email address. And I opened my email and there was something from the adoption registry. I thought, oh, what are they doing? Sending me a birthday card? It's not my birthday. What's going on? And I opened it and it said, hello, my name is Nick. And that was about as far as I could get. I just burst into tears because I knew what was coming. Judging from the adoption registry, there is a possibility you could be my birth mother. I was born 5/24/81 in Rochester, New York, and this is the only entry that returned. Recently, my mother was going through her safe and found some of my adoption records, all of which I had never seen before. Needless to say, I found it very interesting and informing. Included in the documentation was a note my birth mother had written. It was very heartfelt and touching, and in what I can't imagine was probably one of the hardest decisions she has ever had to make. I can't thank her, you, enough for your selflessness. I was brought up in a good home with a great and supportive extended family. I've gone on to college and am currently getting my master's degree. Another thing happened recently which also made me want to reach out. My wife and I had our first baby 17 months ago. It was hard not to think of my circumstances going through the whole process and think what a difficult decision that must have been. She is my everything now, along with my wife, of course, and again, I wanted to thank you for, well, giving me life and making the decision to give me a better life, of which I have had. Thanks to a good home and upbringing. Nick. Well, you can imagine that I just sobbed right out loud at work. Nobody was there. And I just kept reading it and rereading it, and in about maybe a half an hour, Tim, my husband, came walking into the gallery and said, what's the matter? And I said, I couldn't even talk. I just pointed to the screen, and Tim kind of, Maureen, I told you to do that a long time ago. And I said, but it wasn't the right time. It just wasn't the right time for me, so now is the right time. Anyway, I got that letter and didn't really know how to react. You just don't know what to do. I wrote him back and I said, call me tonight, and sent him my phone number. And then, as my mind started working again, I remembered I'm not going to be available tonight. I'm going to be at a play where I can't have my phone on, so I sent him another email. I'm not going to be available until after 9:30. So during the play, my daughter Amory was sitting right next to me, and I never told the kids. I didn't know what was going to happen. So I figured there is no time that is the right time. It wasn't for me to decide. So at the plate, Amory was sitting right there, and then my sister Teresa was sitting one person over, and it was killing me not to be able to tell Teresa what had happened that afternoon. So I got home after the play, and I got on my email again, and there was a response, call me. I'll be up. You know, I have to put the baby to bed, and I'll be up, and I'll answer the phone. I paced, and I walked into bedrooms and out of bedrooms and just paced, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. Is it too late? It's 10:30 now. So I texted him and I said, is it too late? And the phone rang immediately. And he says, hi, this is Nick. So I was so relieved because he just opened the conversation, and he was just really relaxed, which I was not. But I didn't lose it then. I didn't burst into tears. We just had the most wonderful conversation. I remember saying, how do I know that you're really the one? And he said, well, my birth date, and then on the information from the adoption registry, you have a big family, don't you? And I said, oh, okay, then yeah, that's me. So he said, would you like to meet tomorrow sometime? I think my wife is working right now, so when she gets up tomorrow, I'll talk to her, and if we can get together, I'll let you know. So you can imagine even the next day, I could hardly think. And at about 3:30, my phone, I received a text, and he said, how about 7:30 tonight at Starbucks across from Eastview? I don't think I ever asked him where he lived or anything like that, so to think that we could meet somewhere as close as that was very comforting. But I just got in my car and I drove towards Eastview, and I went to my sister's first, and she told me that I needed my hair cut, I needed to change my clothes, I had some hair on my chin, that kind of thing. So I guess I took care of those things first, and then I went up towards Eastview, and just, again, I would go into some place, walk around, walk out, just, I had to walk and breathe, walk and breathe, walk and breathe. And I was a little bit early when I got to Starbucks, and I ordered a drink, and for some reason, Tim knows whenever I order anything, it's wrong. I don't know why that happens. We think it might be because I have really big teeth or something like that, so they're not listening to me, they're looking at my teeth. So there was a drink made, and I took the drink, and she apologized and said, oh, just take it anyway, but let me make what you really did order. So I had 2 drinks, and that was odd. And I went and sat down at a table with 2 drinks, 2 coffees. And I kept thinking, oh my gosh, he'll come in and he won't even stay because he doesn't see anybody that's sitting alone. You know, all these things going through my head. And it was 7 minutes after 7:30, and I thought, oh boy, this isn't going to work. He probably changed his mind. So I texted him and said, I'm here. And he said, so am I. Red chair, blue shirt, something like that. I know. And I was in the wrong room. So I got up and I took both of those coffee drinks with me again. And walked into the other room, and I saw this young man that looked just like my brother Gil. So I just, well, there's no doubt, you know, I just walked right towards him, set the drinks down, and I said, I know it's you, you know, because you look just like my brother. And he stood up, and I know he was like fixing his shirt, and just, we were both pretty nervous. But somebody said, did you hug him? And I said, I don't know. If I did, I don't remember. I just remember setting those 2 drinks down. But anyway, we talked for about 3 hours. It was very comfortable. One of the first things that he said, and he kind of apologized first, was he would do this a lot, you know, like if he was uncomfortable about something, and he'd kind of move said, this is really uncomfortable, but you know, if you're not okay answering it, then that's okay too, but does your father have hair? And I said, no, but he's really handsome. And everything that happened like that, you know, I think he might have said, did you have to have a lot of work done on your teeth? You know, things like that. Just, there was a lot of humor for 3 hours. It was just wonderful. I'm going to back up just a little bit. I thought I had the flu when I was 19, and on the 3rd day, I woke up and said, I don't think this is the flu anymore. I should really kind of put all the pieces together and think about what's going on. And my mom was working at Birthright, so I walked 2 blocks down to Birthright and sat in front of the desk and said, Mom, I think I'm pregnant. And she was wonderful. She kept her cool and said, you know, how do you want to handle this? And I can receive the phone call letting us know whether you are or not, or you can receive it, which would you prefer? And I said, Mom, if you could take that phone call, I would really appreciate it. So that was about it. And then the next day my phone rang and my mom was already crying. So I knew what was going on. And she suggested that I go and live with a family through Catholic Family Services, which I did do, the most wonderful family in the whole world, you know, besides my own. And I lived with them. Jan, the mom of that family, was my coach as I went through labor and delivery. And because Nick was 3 weeks early, I had not made up my mind yet. I kept a journal, and one day it was, yes, I can keep this child, and the next day it was, no, I can't. I just can't do this. You know, I was trying to make money, see how much money I could make, and can I afford raising a child, but no matter what I did, I felt as though I was going to have to work. And I remember living in Fairport, driving to an apartment complex and kind of looking around at what was going on there and thinking, this is where I would be if I chose to keep this child. I don't think I want to do this. But then another day I would say, I can do it. Back and forth. 3 weeks early, I don't know what to do. So I said, Jan, when the baby comes, I can't see him or her hold the baby. I just can't do that. That will have too much to do with my decision. So after he was born, it was 5 grueling hours of pushing. And I didn't know you weren't supposed to push with your face. So I broke every blood vessel in my face and in my eyes. And he was a big baby. Anyway, as I was recouping, Jan kept walking past the doorway with the baby, and I said, Jan, it's okay. I can see him. And she goes, no, I'm not going to let you see him. I'm not going to let you see him at all. We made a decision, an agreement, no. And she went by about 5 times. And on the 5th time, I guess I convinced her that I could handle it. And my mom was there by then, and her best friend. And when Jan brought the baby in, I heard God speak. And I remember kind of looking up like this. Like, where's that coming from, you know? And God said, he is not your child. He is mine, and I will take care of him. His name is Christian. So that made that a lot easier for me. I just felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. And it helped. 6 months later, when my dad said, are you sure that you made the right decision? Absolutely. I know I did the right thing. And as time went on, and Christian, to me, grew older, if I had a moment where I thought, wow, you know, he's 16, I wonder what he's doing, I hope he's okay, I'd say, no, he's okay. You know, God told me he would take care of him. What a wonderful promise. And then to get older and have my own children and know that I didn't have to hurry to meet him. I could leave it up to him, leave it up to the Lord, you know, to kind of make all that work together. So that's when that letter came in. And my children, both of my girls, really reacted beautifully. We've gotten together with Nick as a family. I've also introduced him to the Innes family, and this is probably an interesting way to end this story. We were sitting at the Inneses up, where do they live, in Irondequoit? Anyway, up that way. And they had all kinds of questions for Nick. In fact, when Nick and my daughter Amory and I came to the front door, John Innes said, "I already know you. I've met you before you were in Maureen's tummy the last time I saw you." And just, you know, to kind of have that go full circle was amazing. They had lots of questions for him, so we're sitting at the table, and they said, "What was it that made you finally choose to get a hold of Maureen?" And he said, "Well, it was Friday morning. I was at work, and I ran my hand through my hair." Do I need to say anything more? He wondered if he was going to lose his hair. Which I love that story. But I didn't even look at my notes. I will tell you that at one point Tim said, do you mean you really heard God's voice? I thought that you meant you felt that in your heart. And I think God knew that he had to give me his voice for me to believe him. I didn't really know what to do, so I had to hear him verbally. But it's a beautiful story. This young man likes me and wants to be a part of our family. And just the way that he wrote that first letter, he writes to me every week, and he cares deeply about my kids. I might tell him a little something that's going on, and I get a message right back where he has an idea about something that will help. So I'm thankful. And who do I have to thank? But God himself.
Does anybody have the lucky question?
And you gave a grandchild.
I did. I'm leaving some room for that to happen slowly. We visited he and his wife Jen, who's amazing, and Natalie, this little girl who's probably 19 months now, maybe a little bit older. We went up there just a week ago for a barbecue, and that little Natalie called Tim Grandpa the whole time we were there.
That's awesome.
Isn't that neat? Yeah. And this is Nick and I that night at Starbucks. Amazing. God is so good.
Thank you for sharing. There are some people you meet and just feel that you're never going to spend enough time with them. I met somebody a little over an hour ago, and I thought, God, I wish he was my next door neighbor, that I could bug him and just kind of sit and hear the story. And I was totally captivated when I first met Sam Rind, just a few minutes before 7 o'clock tonight. The title we've given him is a Holocaust survivor. And those of us who have only read about it in history can only imagine what that experience was. And so I'm going to ask Sam to come forward and to tell his story. And he says he doesn't need the mic.
Hello, everybody. I was told I'm pretty loud, so I don't, in more ways than one, I guess. As you heard already, my name is Samuel Rind. Some people pronounce it Rind. I do correct it, but if they repeat it again, I let it go. I was born in Poland, 1937. So When the war started, I was about 2.5. But at that time, my mom was also pregnant, unfortunately. And towards the end of 39, she had a little boy. The little boy was named Nathan. I consider myself lucky in a sense because we did not spend time in any of those so-called extermination camps. We were in a bunch of camps that they fed you the same thing they feed the horses, and they made you work every day from sunup to sundown. That was including children 5 and up. Now, what kind of work was it? Digging graves, chopping stones. What would they use those graves for? What's a grave for? It's to bury people. Except in this case, it didn't really matter if they were dead or alive. Huh? If you couldn't perform your duties, and if they noticed that, which a lot of people, of course, try to help out the sick people by keeping them in between two healthy ones, kind of like standing up or kneeling. But the minute that person fell forward, I'm sure you realize where that person went down. In the grave that he or she might have dug themselves. As I said, we spent just pay attention if you're really interested, because I always go back and forth, okay? It's hard enough for me to talk about these things, and it's even harder to try to keep it in order. It took one person, the lady that was in charge of this before at the Jewish Federation, it took her over 15 years on working on me to try to convince me to do what I'm doing right now. On many occasions, she had made arrangements with people to tape my story. 15 minutes before they were supposed to show up, I would call them and cancel it. And I've done that many times. Until one day, this lady herself, Barbara Applebaum, decided she was going to come over to the house and she's going to do it, period. So it was done, and it was sent. This was done for the Spielberg Foundation. So there's a copy here at the Jewish Federation. I have a couple copies, and obviously the so-called original is at USC, which is where Spielberg's foundation works out of. As I said before, we spent time in quite a few concentration camps. None had any of the famous names. But one camp specifically, which was in Rachnei. Rachnei was close, well it is, to the Ukraine. Of course, in those days there was no Ukraine per se, it was USSR, Soviet Union. Before we were captured and thrown in a camp, the families have decided to go out at it and hide together. And suddenly there was a voice of wisdom. One of my dad's brothers said, "We can't do that, that's stupid. They catch us all, they kill us all, and we're done. Our family is gone." So we split up. Dad, Mom, myself, and my little brother and my mother's sister, husband, and 3 daughters became one group. And there were different groups with different amount of people. Just to give you an idea, there were a total between the 2 of them originally of 20 siblings between my dad's side and mom's side. 2 or 3, I don't remember correctly, could have been even 4 of the siblings died before age 1 or age 2. And then 5 siblings, my mom's siblings, from 2 mothers and 1 father, because my grandfather's first wife was very ill and she died, I don't know, she was either late 30s or early 40s. 5 of those siblings wound up in the United States before the war started. Actually, some of them before the World War I started. They were sent to the United States as punishment. Yeah, you heard me right. As punishment. My grandfather, may he rest in peace, was an ultra-religious person. Jewish religion, of course. And because they did not respect a Saturday or a Jewish holiday, he decided they were no longer his kids. And therefore, they were shipped away. And as far as he was concerned, they were dead. And he would even say a prayer. That's still happening nowadays, folks. Fortunately, I kind of changed, which I'm sure my wife is glad about that too. Because my son married a non-Jewish person. If that would have happened way back then, I would have been saying a special prayer for my son's death. I couldn't get myself to do that. Not after what I went through. So anyway, we were back and forth through camps. And for some reason or another, I don't know why, they kept putting us back on the truck and sending us back to Rafnei. But just before all that started, my dad, whose family were considered rich in those days because they had 2 farms. The entire family, him and his siblings, parents, they all farmed it. They all worked from sun up to sundown. They had cattle, they had horses, they had chicken, they had vegetables, they had it all. In those days it was pretty common. Of course, nowadays you don't see any Jewish farmers. I guess life changes. So what he did before that happened, everybody already knew the Germans getting ready. I mean, they started getting ready when? 1933. Yeah, the war started in 1939, big deal. But everything really started in 1933, the day that Knutt became the Chancellor of Germany. That's when it all started. And that's where a lot of Jews throughout Europe became very suspicious and very insecure. So what my dad did is he dug and built hiding places for jewels, jewelry, stones, watches, whatever he could hide in there. Rafnei only had a few guards and they really didn't bother you. So if you were one individual and careful and half smart, you could get out, not get caught, and come back 2-3 days later like nothing happened. Well, that's what my dad used to do. Why would he do that? He would go to the hiding place and came back with some stuff so he can exchange for real food with the people that lived in that town. They would come up to the fence, and through the fence And they were so magnanimous. I mean, they're so willing to help us. They would give us a potato for an 18-karat gold ring. That's how nice they were to us. One day, and by the way, what did Mom do with the potato? My mom was a very smart woman. Probably the most intelligent person on earth as far as I'm concerned. Remember, I grew up with my mom. She was my mother, my teacher, my everything. Okay? And when I go and talk to kids, high schools or colleges, I told them just give a little bit of credit to your mother. Maybe just a little bit. But one thing I will tell, that I tell those kids, don't try to lie to Mom. She'll know it the minute you open up your mouth. She'll look at you, play dumb, and say, yeah, right. They know where you are. They know what you're doing. I talk a lot about my mother. So my mother took that potato, cooked it, gave the meat of the potato to my little brother, who could eat a horse, would give the skin to me, and she and Dad would share the broth. She and Dad would share the broth. Unfortunately, one day my dad didn't come back. 5 days went by, 7 days, 10 days. So I turned around to Mom. I wasn't quite 5. I think I was between 4 and 4.5. And I says, Mom, where's Dad? She took a deep breath, hugged my little brother and myself at the same time. And she said, don't worry, we will see him. Those were her words. Took me a day or two, and then I realized what she meant. We'll see him in heaven someday. That's what she meant. So now, of course, we had a problem. To the extent, well, one day, Mom is sitting in a chair with my little brother on her lap, and I'm sitting next to her, on the right side next to her. Suddenly, my little brother starts screaming, yelling, crying. And every time louder and louder. Suddenly we hear this voice outside the door. Make him stop. How can you stop a little kid from crying when he's hungry? A few minutes later, the same voice, but make him stop or I will. And a few minutes later, this guard, Nazi guard, comes in with a yellow stick, starts hitting my little brother until he killed him on my mom's lap. And of course, nature, I start crying. So my mom looks at me, covers up my mouth very gently, and she said, please don't. I stopped right there. And I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, at that point, I became an adult. That was the end of my childhood. And there's one thing I emphasize to the kids. See, you have no idea, I tell them. You have one of the most precious gifts on earth. You have a childhood, which I never had. I grew up. And I grew up fast. And by the way, as a point of information, remember I said Nazi guard? I didn't say a German Nazi guard, right? It's not that I'm excusing Germans, but that SOB happened to be Ukrainian. Ukrainians, Latvians, Romanians, and many, many situations were worse than the Germans or the Poles. Not too many people realize that. Because they wanted to show Germany that they love it. That they love the fear. After that, something very interesting happened. This lady comes in, also a Holocaust survivor, comes into camp, and she says to my mom, she says, Clara, there's somebody by the fence that would like to talk to you. So mom looks at me, I look at mom. Who wanted to talk to us? Why? Who knows we're here? But one thing I must tell you, in those days, believe it or not, news would travel out and into camps. Why? I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the word partisans. These were guerrilla types, people, most of them Jews, that decided to fight. Decided to die fighting. How would they do that? They would live in the woods. They would hide in the woods. And they would kill 2, 3 soldiers, German soldiers, and take their guns. They didn't have any at that point. They would take toys and make Molotov grenades out of them. For those that don't know what a Molotov is, you fill it with gas, you light it, and it becomes a grenade. You can kill a lot of people. They would set traps in the woods. They would be high in the trees, just like monkeys. That's how news would travel because of them. They would go from camp to camp to see what's going on and to see if they can recruit healthy men and or women, believe it or not. The reason I'm saying that is because young Jewish soldiers in Israel the women proved they can fight as good as men can. And cause as much damage as men can. But of course, we didn't know that before that happened. But anyway. So mom decides that she was going to go out. So I'm getting up and walking with her. She says, no, you stay here. So mom went up to the fence. She comes back and says, well, your aunt and uncle from Zmerinka is a town in the Ukraine. They're sending this young lady so she can prepare us and take us out of here and take us to Zmerinka. She's going to be back in, I forgot, 3, 4, 5 days, whatever the case is. But first she says, we have a little problem. I was that little problem. I don't know if any of you guys can think of what, but in those days, 95% of the circumcised men were Jews. Obviously, I was circumcised. So if we get caught by guards, guess what would have happened? There would have been 3 dead people, right? The girl, mom, and I. But because mom was so smart, she took a bunch of linen and made an oversized, really oversized shawl. Wrapped me around with this shawl and made me look like a nice, cute little girl. So that, plus the fact that the young lady that saved our lives was blonde and blue-eyed, and surprisingly, she was also Jewish. The reason I'm saying, in those days, there weren't that many blonde, blue-eyed Jews, okay? And she was beautiful. So luckily for us, we were stopped 3 times. And excuse me for using those words, but those stupid guards kept looking at her because she was so beautiful. I guess men always have dirty minds, don't they? Including me, of course. I'm not a exception, unfortunately. So that's what saved us. But also what I believe, the fact that I'm alive thanks to Mom in more than one way. And the fact that that child made me look like a girl, that was good enough. But of course, it was Rachel, that young Jewish, blonde, blue-eyed girl that saved us, because all the eyes of the guards were there. I mean, we didn't exist. It was just her. So thank God for that. So finally we get to Zmerinka. Zmerinka, there was a ghetto. All the Jews were in that ghetto. I mean, we all know what a ghetto is, okay? My uncle, aunt, and cousin, who is still alive, I hope, lives in Israel. He's about 11 something older than I am. Unfortunately, totally blind, lost one arm. In the other arm, he only has 3 fingers. But yet, extremely, extremely smart. Listens to the news, television, just listen, that's all, right? So the 3 of them lived in one apartment by this guy who owned the building. His name was Kutsenko. K-U-T-Z if you want to spell E-N-K-O, Kutsenko. He was Jewish, and he was what you would consider, even nowadays, filthy rich. So, even though it was a Jewish ghetto, he had lots of freedoms. Why? Because they say money buys everything, right? Well, he did. He did. By him doing that, he saved a lot of families, including us, of course. Even though we were in there, in that ghetto, we were not supposed to be there. So if there was a general inspection or whatever you want to call it, 6 families would have been taken to jail. Why? Because at night we all hid in a totally unfinished basement. Used to be called a cellar. I don't know if you're familiar with a cellar, but there's nothing in the cellar. Absolutely nothing. I mean, dirt, stones, that's it. That's a cellar. Or a cellar. Or a cellar. Not too many people have heard those words. I see there's one young lady there that she knows where it goes. Huh?
We live in an old house. It has a cellar.
There you go. There you go. It's got to be a really old house. So, at night we would hide there. But what he also did, Kutsenkos, he had a gorgeous, gorgeous closet. Wooden closet, of course, with 3 bottoms. Can't imagine why, right? If there's an inspection, they'll come in, they'll definitely open up the closet and look, and they'll lift the first bottom there. And then just in case they say, well, let's lift another one. We were underneath the 3rd one. The only one that ever, while we were there, opened the 3rd one was him, Kutsenko. So that was good. And we were there for a long time. Now, while we were in the ghetto, there was a public market. And because my cousin had joined the KGB, we know what that was, right? Russian secret police. Kind of like our CIA, just a little worse. Because if you did something they didn't like, next morning the neighbors said, oh my God, he must have moved. The apartment was totally empty. No furniture, no nothing. And the poor guy was probably buried alive. That was nothing unusual for the KGB. So he wanted to become a member. Why did he want to become a member? First of all, he lied about the age, but they didn't ask him for documents. He was only 17, you had to be at least 18. He wanted to have a gun. So he joined the KGB. But that helped us. Because Mom wanted to have a spot over in the public market. So he just went to the management of the public market and says, I need a spot today, not tomorrow, today. They knew he was from the KGB. They weren't going to argue with him. You know? So she had a little spot. Now what would my mom do? She would go pick out stuff from the garbage, trash, whatever, clean it up, fix it if necessary. That's why I said, I talk a lot about my mom. She could do everything. There was nothing she couldn't do. And then she would also grow vegetables in the back of the house, and she would sell that stuff. And my cousin would take me in the morning to school. That was the first time I ever went to school, in 1943. I was 6 years old. First time. But you know what? I knew how to read, I knew how to write, I knew how to add, multiply, divide, so forth. Why? My mom taught me. But one thing you don't realize, ladies and gentlemen, my mom never finished 7th grade. Yet she was teaching me all that stuff. Amazing, isn't it? Why did you drop out of school? Because grandfather died of a brain hemorrhage. So mom quit school so she can help her mom, my grandmother, with the business. What's interesting is the kind of business she had. She's laughing. Booze. Grandma in the booze business, which was illegal. But to show you how smart that woman was, my grandmother, her best customer, was the chief of police of that town. Okay? So she could almost do it all in the open. Nobody was going to touch her. Are you kidding me? Well, anyway, that is why my mother quit school before she finished 7th grade. Till the day my mother died, she never used a calculator. Once in a while, she would take pencil and paper. But she had her own computer, which we still do in the family, thank God. Good genes. My kids are amazing with numbers. Just because of Grandma. That's why I talk a lot about my mother. She's in a public market. My cousin picks me up from school, drops me off at the market. I sit right next to my mom. And this particular day, Mom suddenly started gazing in front of her. She started shaking. Suddenly she starts pointing. And she starts crying and screaming. My cousin heard her, comes running back, and says to her, "What's the matter, Anne?" Obviously in Yiddish, which is mime. that guy's wearing my husband's leather jacket.
Oh.
My cousin went up to him, shot him on the spot. But he made sure he didn't damage the jacket. Why? Why? See, when my little brother was killed by the Nazi guard, what did Mom and I do? We took him immediately while his body was still warm, and we buried him outside camp, Rachne. The reason he didn't want to damage the leather jacket is because we didn't have that, but we had this leather jacket that we buried instead of burying a body. So somewhere in Rachne lays my little brother. Somewhere in Smerinka behind Kutsenko's house is something that belonged to my dad. Those are the memories I have. Well, going forward, obviously we don't have time. Quickly. We were liberated March 22nd, 1944 by soldiers from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, mountain people. They came in on horses, and whenever they saw a German soldier, they would stamp him with a horse, kill him, and if necessary, they would cut body parts to take a golden ring or a watch or whatever. Instead of just taking off the watch nut, they would take off the whole wrist. They liberated us. As soon as that happened, Mom started thinking. Again, smart woman. She did not trust the Russians. So as soon as the war ended, May 1945, Mom decided we're going back to Poland. Why Poland? Again, remember I told you there were news sources coming around? The whole group decided to go to Poland, form a kibbutz, which is a commune. People live together, work together, share, up to a certain extent, of course, but they share everything. So we went to Poland. The group was formed. 90% of that group went to Israel. Mom decided it wasn't time. So what did we do? We crossed to Czechoslovakia from Poland. From Czechoslovakia, we crossed to Austria. But before that happened, Mom had heard rumors that you can make good money with cigarettes. Smartest woman on earth.
She was an entrepreneur.
She was definitely an entrepreneur. She got a hold of an oversized overcoat. So I can wear the oversized overcoat. She opened up the lining, filled it with cigarettes. Now, where did she have the money? Well, the money she made on the market, right? She had money. Everything was in gold coins. Most of them rubles. 5 rubles in gold, 24 karat actually, or 10 rubles in gold. And she would fill that. I mean, you're going across the border, a child, who's going to touch him, you know?
Chubby. Little chubby.
A little fat, you know. So I went across, and my mom was behind me. She was sweating it out, I know that. But so the guy looks at me, pushes me aside, and starts looking at my mom, around her, behind her, in front of her. And meanwhile, I'm on the other side. I'm in Austria already, okay? Now, that was our lucky day. Once we got there, and of course, she sold later on, she sold the cigarettes in Austria to Austrians because the Americans had cigarettes, so they didn't need it. We wound up in the American zone. As most of you probably know, right after the war, you had the Russian zone, British zone, American zone. Everybody took a part of Austria and Germany, so on and so forth. We were lucky we wound up in the American zone. And the first thing the GIs did is, of course, they gave us barracks with nice, clean rooms, clean bedding. We looked at that stuff. We were afraid to touch it. We were afraid to touch it because we thought we were going to contaminate it. So this one soldier, one GI comes in and shows us our room, bunk bed. Who cared? It was a bed. I didn't know what a bed was until that day. Mom asked this young GI in Yiddish, Jewish, poor guy didn't know what she was talking about. So, but he thought quickly, he ran to the chapel and brought this young rabbi, spoke Yiddish. So she tells him, if at all possible, she would like to have an extra blanket. No questions asked. He runs out, comes back with an extra blanket. Just for fun. Why do you think my mom wanted an extra blanket for? Pardon? Nah, she decided she wanted to make me a suit. Now do you know why I respect my mom so much? Mom died a little bit over 7 years ago. Right?
She was almost 93.
Right. She would have been 100 today. She would have been 100 in March. So. That's why Mom, to me, she's it. Okay, but. So as soon as that happened, Mom started thinking right away about coming to the United States, right? Should have been easy, right? 5 siblings, right? So they brought in a whole bunch of papers. She fills out the papers. The U.S. government sends the papers to the State Department. All of my uncles and aunts sign, guarantee that they'll support us for the rest of our life if necessary, right? Because that's always the fear of immigrants, that they'll wind up bumming and living like kings with taxpayers' money, you know? We know what that is, don't we? So, but I'm not going to talk about politics. I never mix politics with this. Make a long story short, the papers came back, we were rejected. Okay? So, the camp commander, he saw that and he was furious. Furious. So, we fill out a new set of papers. He co-signed all those papers. He sent them in a special pouch. Guess what? We were rejected again.
Oh my goodness.
Now I'm going to say something, some of you may not like it. That was the policy of, who was the president then? FDR. If you dig enough into FDR history, you'll realize that he did not want to tell the American people because he was afraid that the American people were going to suffer. So he kept everything for the American people. And to this day, personally, folks, I swear that if Japan doesn't attack Pearl Harbor, the United States never goes into the war. And for those that are readers and researchers, you can research back to a Reader's Digest, 1932, I think it was February or March, an awesome journalist, I don't remember his name, he wrote, he predicted that Japan was going to attack Pearl Harbor. Everybody laughed about that article. That was in 1932. Right? Amazing, isn't it? But that's what FDR did. FDR also rejected the famous St. Louis ship with almost, what, 900 Jews on it? That was just before the war started. Had to ship it back to Europe. I can tell you stories about FDR to the point that those of you that don't have white hair would get it instantaneously. Anyway, so Mom says, to hell with this crap, enough is enough. We'll go to Bolivia. Why Bolivia? Mom had a brother in Bolivia, my Uncle Moises, who had escaped Poland because he didn't want to join the Polish army before the war started. So what happened? My grandmother dressed him up as a woman.
Now you know where the genes come from.
Dressed him up as a woman, took him all the way to Warsaw, put him on a ship to France, and then she went back home. And by coincidence, I think my uncle and my wife's parents wound up on the same ship in March of 1939, and then they wound up in Bolivia in June of 1939. Okay? Purely coincidence. But you see, the women in my family are just amazing. Just amazing. So she decides, no, we're going to go to Bolivia. Make a long story short, we go to, before that, I am truly thankful to the GIs. There's a big difference between GIs and government, okay? They took, of course, I forgot to tell you, the first day we got there, they gave every child a piece of chocolate. Hershey bars. That was the first time I saw chocolate, or that I remembered that I had chocolate. But really, to show how concerned they were about the kids, they took all the kids alone to a place called Strobel, which was a place that usually only the ultra-rich people could visit. Beautiful lakes, train would run in the mountains. They took us there for 5 days. Needless to say that we realized there is good life after all, because of the GIs, not because of the stinking government in those days. Okay? So, make a long story short, we get to Bolivia, and Mom had decided that we're going to be in Bolivia about a year or two, get things going, organized, and then we're going to apply again. But meanwhile, it didn't happen so fast because unfortunately we found out that my aunt, my uncle's wife, that was in Bolivia, and my little cousin girl were killed by the Nazis, and they were blown in by their Polish neighbors. Somebody told them they are Jews because my aunt didn't look Jewish. But they told them they're Jews. That was the end of it, of course. So make a long story short, about 2 years later or so, we go up to the American consulate anyway, fill out papers, blah, blah, blah. We were rejected again. So to me, at that point, to me, that had become a joke. But then I promised myself and Mom, I said, you know, someday I will go there, even if it's just as a student. I want to find out if Americans are really that stupid. And of course, pleasant surprise. Everybody I met in Buffalo, everybody I met in school, great. That's when I learned what politics are. That's when I learned what politicians are. They're just interested in themselves, so it doesn't matter which party they belong to. They want to make sure they spend that 1 term or 2 terms, and then they're set for the rest of their lives, aren't they? Well, you and I have to work so we can pay their way. Amazing. So anyway, 1960, I went to Buffalo, went to school, graduated, worked for a while in New York City. Then I left and started dating this young lady here. Got hooked, and almost 45 years later, we're still together. So I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
You know. One thing I forgot to tell you. My son has a son. His name is Nathan.
Oh, nice.
Very much so. Okay?
Very nice, whatever.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm just curious, when did you bring your mom over?
I'm sorry?
Did you
When-
bring your mom over?
Yeah, Mom was here at the Jewish home.
20 years ago.
Right, but she spent, what, 12 years?
12 years in the Jewish home, but we brought her over. It's almost 20 years.
She didn't want to come, but unfortunately she had no choice because all of her friends were dying off. And
She remarried.
well, yeah, that was way back then. She remarried for my 18th birthday, only because I pushed hard. I really didn't want her to be alone. She married a wonderful, wonderful man. And people ask me, you know, stepfather, girl's a stepfather. No, that's not true. See, I don't remember what a father is like, but I don't think it could have been much better than the way he was to me. Okay, so in that sense, we're very lucky. I mean, he would have done anything and everything for my mother.
And once she lost her husband and she lost her brother, we brought her here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, my uncle, unfortunately, never forgave. Well, neither have I, as a matter of fact. But he was a sourpuss all his life because of it. He just couldn't fathom it. He just couldn't. Okay, I'm sorry. That was it?
Thank you.
Why your cousin was blind and
Oh,
lost an arm.
yeah, she's right. Thank you. Why? Remember, he joined KGB. So, and usually I usually would sit on his lap and he would tickle me and blah, 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 and play. That particular day, I did not. He was playing with a grenade.
He found.
He thought it was a dud. It exploded. Most of the grenade wound up in my aunt's stomach. She died in the early 50s. No, later than that?
No. We were married already.
You're right. You're right. So she must have died in the late 60s.
Late 60s.
Late 60s. But she suffered, I don't have to tell you, melon in the stomach. That is why my cousin is the way he is. He calls it himself, but as I said, he thought, he was positive that it was a dud. And I wasn't sitting on his lap that day. So that's why I'm here to tell the story. Okay, any more questions? If you have the time, I don't know.
God tells us that we need to forgive. Are we
Right.
able to?
And more so in our case, we're the chosen ones. No, I'm not able to forgive. And I will go to my grave then. Forget and forgive, that's a little tough. A little tough when I lost more than 70 direct members of my family. With all due respect to you, but no. I know we're the chosen ones, and I even study a little bit religion because of my mom. My mom knew this stuff, religion inside out. As I said before, my grandfather was extremely orthodox. But what I didn't tell you is he was what it's called in Hebrew a melamed, which means it's a teacher of teachers. he thought and advised rabbis, and my grandfather was not one. And in those days, of course, that was taboo for women. But one mom did. She hid behind the curtain to listen to him. We would go high holidays or any time we would go to temple to pray. Guess what? She never used a book. Now do you know why I talk that much about my mother? I'm telling you, the woman and my mom's family was unbelievable. And as a matter of fact, some of them got to live, not my grandmother, but my mom's grandmother got to live in the mid to late 80s. And before that, up to 90s. So, yes, sir.
You had moved from a camp to a city in Ukraine.
Zmeninka.
How did you leave the camp? Did you escape?
Yes. This young lady,
Yes.
this gorgeous blonde.
How did she take you out?
I thought that you
By
were
the
just
way,
meeting one
those that
woman.
are the curiosity, whatever, her dream was to fight for Israel independence. She did, and she died in the war of 1948.
So she could just take you out?
She took us out of camp.
Well, they escaped.
You know, remember what I said before? You kind of, if you were careful and a little smart, you could move in and out. Well, we did, and she did the rest. Very gutsy young lady. No fear in her eyes at all. Very positive of herself.
Just a quick question. What do you think of Israel's situation today? Not to give a long answer.
Oh, no, you can't give me. What do I think of it? If the rest of the world stopped bugging them, they'll be fine. Right now, most of your big electronic companies have their best production in Israel. I'm talking about American companies. Israel is #1 startup country in the world, right? You don't have to believe me, you can look it up.
Probably.
Okay? And I just brought something, since you asked that question, very interesting. This is an article was written in 2008. I'm not going to read it. It was written in 2008 in Spain by a Spanish writer called Sebastián Villar Rodriguez. And he's saying there that Europe lost their brains during World War II in the concentration camps. And now we adopted a bunch of no good people, and he's talking about the Muslims, that live in Spain, that live from the government, do nothing on their own, and on top, he says, they come here, not only do they tell us what to do and how much to give them, they bomb our subways. And then he says, we respect them because, he says here, oh yeah, he says, I forgot. They had some Nobel Prize winners. So he names them, and all the way up to then, 2008, they were all of 7 that got, and then he names all the Jews that got Nobel Prizes. And this was written by a non-Jew. Only 129. So now do you know why the world loves us? We're hated for one simple reason, ladies and gentlemen. We are smart. Proof is right here. I'm a Jew all the way. I was born one, I am one, and I'll die one. I'm proud of it. And I'm glad you asked that question. My first chance to say something about that. I don't know why I brought it.
I'm part of your act.
Huh?
He's part of your act.
I'm going to ask that those who might want to stay with Mr. Rinn and ask more questions,
More than happy to.
and those who want to move to the flag lowering, those of you who have never experienced that and the prayer that goes with that, will find it most moving. And you can come with us?
I'm still kind of faithful. We go to temple once in a while, mainly the Jewish high holidays. I haven't really lost my faith, but I learned how to give some.
Yeah. Thank you for giving tonight.
It's hard. But what are you going to do? I mean, you know, life is what it is. I can't change it. I mean, this was, I guess, the crystal ball, that was my part. That's what I'm doing.
What profession did you go with?
Oh, eyeglasses. I love that profession. There isn't a hell of a lot of money in it, but I love what I do. I love what I do.
So it's not cigarettes?
So let's take a moment to look at those questions, because they will help in terms of just where you situate yourself, okay? Yeah,
They took, of course, I forgot to tell you, the first day we got there, they gave every child a piece of chocolate. Hershey bars. That was the first time I saw chocolate, or that I remembered that I had chocolate. But really, to show how concerned they were about the kids, they took all the kids alone to a place called Strobel, which was a place that usually only the ultra-rich people could visit. Beautiful lakes, train would run in the mountains. They took us there for 5 days. Needless to say that we realized there is good life after all, because of the GIs. Not because of the stinking government in those days. Okay? So, make a long story short, we get to Bolivia. And Mom had decided that we're going to be in Bolivia about a year or two, get things going, organized, and then we're going to apply again. But meanwhile, it didn't happen so fast because unfortunately we found out that my aunt, my uncle's wife, that was in Bolivia, and my little cousin girl were killed by the Nazis, and they were blown in by their Polish neighbors. Somebody told them they are Jews, because my aunt didn't look Jewish. But they told them they're Jews. That was the end of it, of course. So make a long story short, about 2 years later or so, we go up to the American consulate anyway, fill out papers, blah, blah, blah. We were rejected again. So to me, at that point, to me, that had become a joke. But then I promised myself and Mom, I says, you know, someday I will go there, even if it's just as a student. I want to find out if Americans are really that stupid. And of course, pleasant surprise. Everybody I met in Buffalo, everybody I met in school, great. That's when I learned what politics are. That's when I learned what politicians are. They're just interested in themselves, folks. It doesn't matter which party they belong to. They want to make sure they spend that 1 term or 2 terms, and then they're set for the rest of their lives, aren't they? Well, you and I have to work so we can pay their way. Amazing. So anyway, 1960, I went to Buffalo, went to school, graduated, worked for a while in New York City. Then I left and started dating this young lady here. Got hooked, and almost 45 years later, we're still together. So I think that's pretty good. Yeah. You know. One thing I forgot to tell you. My son has a son. His name is Nathan.
Oh, nice.
Very much so. Okay?
You're next, whenever.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm just curious, when did you bring your mom over?
I'm sorry?
Did you
When-
bring your mom over?
Yeah, mom was here at the Jewish home.
20 years ago.
Right, but she spent, what, 12 years?
12 years in the Jewish home, but we brought her over. It's almost 20 years.
She didn't want to come, but unfortunately she had no choice because all of her friends were dying off. And
She remarried.
well, yeah, that was way back then. She remarried for my 18th birthday, only because I pushed hard. I really didn't want her to be alone. She married a wonderful, wonderful man. And people ask me, you know, stepfather, girl's a stepfather. No, that's not true. See, I don't remember what a father is like, but I don't think it could have been much better than the way he was to me. Okay, so in that sense, we were very lucky. I mean, he would have done anything and everything for my mother.
And once she lost her husband and she lost her brother, we brought her here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, my uncle, unfortunately, never forgave. Well, neither have I, as a matter of fact. But he was a sourpuss all his life because of it. He just couldn't fathom it. He just couldn't. Okay, I'm sorry. That was it?
Thank you.
Why your cousin was blind and
Oh,
lost an arm.
yeah, she's right. Thank you. Why? Remember, he joined KGB. So, and usually I usually would sit on his lap and he would tickle me and blah, 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 and play. That particular day, I did not. He was playing with a grenade.
He found.
He thought it was a dud. It exploded. Most of the grenade wound up in my aunt's stomach. She died in the early 50s. No, later than that?
No. We were married already.
You're right. You're right. So she must have died in the late 60s.
Late 60s.
Late 60s. But she suffered, I don't have to tell you, melon in the stomach. That is why my cousin is the way he is. He calls it himself, but as I said, he thought, he was positive that it was a dud. And I wasn't sitting on his lap that day. So that's why I'm here to tell the story. Okay, any more questions? If you have the time, I don't know.
God tells us that we need to forgive. Are we
Right.
able to?
And most in our case, we're the chosen ones. No, I'm not able to forgive. And I will go to my grave then. Forget and forgive, that's a little tough. A little tough when I lost more than 70 direct members of my family. With all due respect to you, but no. I know we're the chosen ones, and I even study a little bit religion because of my mom. My mom knew this stuff, religion inside out. As I said before, my grandfather was extremely orthodox. But what I didn't tell you is he was what it's called in Hebrew a melamed, which means it's a teacher of teachers. He taught and advised rabbis, and my grandfather was not one. And in those days, of course, that was taboo for women. But one mom did. She hid behind the curtain to listen to him. We would go high holidays or any time we would go to temple to pray. Guess what? She never used a book. Now do you know why I talk that much about my mother? I'm telling you, the woman and my mom's family was unbelievable. And as a matter of fact, some of them got to live not my grandmother, but my mom's grandmother got to live in the mid to late 80s, and before that, up to 90s, so it's, yes, sir.
You had moved from a camp to a city in Ukraine.
Zmeninka.
How did you leave the camp? Did you escape?
Yes. This young lady,
Yes.
this gorgeous blonde.
Yeah, I thought that you
By
were
the
just
way,
leaving one
those that
war.
are the curiosity, whatever, her dream was to fight for Israel independence. She did, and she died in the war of 1948.
So she could just take you out?
She took us out of camp.
Well, they escaped.
You know, remember what I said before? You kind of, if you were careful and a little smart, you could move in and out. Well, we did, and she did the rest. Very gutsy young lady. No fear in her eyes at all. Very positive of herself.
Just a quick question. What do you think of Israel's situation today? Not to give a long answer.
Oh, no, you can't give me. What do I think of it? If the rest of the world stopped bugging them, they'll be fine. Right now, most of your big electronic companies have their best production in Israel. I'm talking about American companies. Israel is #1 startup country in the world, right? You don't have to believe me, you can look it up.
Probably.
Okay? And I just brought something, since you asked that question, very interesting. This is an article was written in 2008. I'm not going to read it. It was written in 2008 in Spain by a Spanish writer called Sebastián Villar Rodriguez. And he's saying there that Europe lost their brains during World War II in the concentration camps. And now we adopted a bunch of no good people, and he's talking about the Muslims, that live in Spain, that live from the government, do nothing on their own, and on top, he says, they come here, not only do they tell us what to do and how much to give them, they bomb our subways. And then he says, we respect them because, he says here, oh yeah, he says, I forgot. They had some Nobel Prize winners. So he names them, and all the way up to then, 2008, they were all of 7 that got, and then he names all the Jews that got Nobel Prizes. And this was written by a non-Jew. Only 129. So now do you know why the world loves us? We're hated for one simple reason, ladies and gentlemen. We are smart. Proof is right here. I'm a Jew all the way. I was born one, I am one, and I'll die one. I'm proud of it. And I'm glad you asked that question. My first chance to say something about that. I don't know why I brought it.
I'm part of your act.
He's part of your act.
I'm going to ask that those who might want to stay with Mr. Rinn and ask more questions,
More than happy to.
and those who want to move to the flag lowering, those of you who have never experienced that and the prayer that goes with that, will find it most moving. And you can come with us.
I'm still kind of faithful. We go to temple once in a while, mainly the Jewish high holidays. I haven't really lost my faith, but I learned how to give some.
Yeah. Thank you for giving tonight.
It's hard. But what are you going to do? I mean, you know, life is what it is. I can't change it. I mean, this was, I guess, the crystal ball. That was my part. That's what I'm doing.
profession would you go with?
Oh, eyeglasses. I love that profession. There isn't a hell of a lot of money in it, but I love what I
Look
do.
at those questions, because they
I
will
love
help
it.
So it's
love
not
it.
just where
cigarettes?
you.